I'm JP Tuesday.
And I'm Kiki Cannon. As lifelong Disney fans, the work of countless talented Disney creatives have shaped our lives.
Now, as the Disney catalog expands, we're taking a journey through film and television to discover if that spark that shaped us as children lives on in adulthood.
Does your favorite Disney media still cast that same spell? Join us as we find out. We are Rewatching the Magic.
Hi, Kiki.
Hi, Tuesday.
We are recording this episode before the big game. The Super Bowl has not happened as of this recording. The Seattle Seahawks taking on the New England Patriots. But this episode will be released the day after the Super Bowl. So we have no idea which team won. But yeah.
I'm sure everyone's sports to their sportsiest, and I'm sure whoever won deserved to win or something of the sort.
So we are talking Remember the Titans, the 2000 movie starring Denzel Washington about the school then known as T.C. Williams High School in the 1970s as they were integrating black students and white students. So yeah, that is pretty much the reasons we're doing this movie. One, because of football and Super Bowl, and the other is Black History Month. And this is a story about racism and these kids coming together through their mutual love of football to overcome the race barrier. This movie was based off a true story. The summer of 1971, where we get Coach Herman Boone becoming the first black football coach in the Virginia school system to coach this integrated school team with kind of taking the job of the previous football coach for the school, Bill Yost, and the various issues that came from that situation. We've made it clear on this show, neither one of us are very big sports fans. So talking about sports movie isn't really our forte.
Just to clarify, I am not the biggest sports fan. I have gotten more into it recently than usual. It turns out it's not the sports I really object to. I just don't like sports culture. I've kind of discovered that about myself more recently. You know, we have said on the show before, I am from an area in the Deep South and a town that is primarily built on football. If you know the town I'm from for anything, you know it for its football legacy. The university I graduated from twice is known for its football program, primarily. The high school that I went to is quite a bit known for its football program. I mean, my town is built on football. Football is massive here. So when little baby, the grown-up narrator, Hayden Panettiere character, says that football is bigger than Christmas. I mean, one of my town's biggest things is, our university continued to play football even through a hurricane, and I remember that game, they played it on ESPN. We watched it during the hurricane.
Also, I mean, this movie came out 1 year after another football movie, Varsity Blues. That movie also centers around high school football and the culture around that. Not every town gets a professional football team. Not every town has a college football team. So what do? You go for the high school football team. So the whole town is going to be invested in the high school team because that is all the football they have. And it's kind of reflected in this movie, more so because this becoming the first integrated school in Virginia at the time.
Well, I mean, that's one of those things that, when things are based on a true story, this is not claiming to be a documentary. This is a fictionalized version of real events. They say in the movie that, they were the only integrated team that they were playing against their first season. All the other schools are white. They don't have to worry about the race issue. We have to worry about, our fans and our town, not what really happened. It turns out that every other school in the area and the schools that they had played their first season had all been integrated several years before the school we follow in this movie. The school that produced the Titans was the last school to be the product of integration. And it was a school that was created during integration, they would frequently again, I live in the Deep South, and I do know this history because, I was born just after this period of time, and my parents and grandparents told me all the stories of having lived through this time period, because this was the period they were in high school, at least my parents were, and my grandparents would also tell stories of seeing their kids go through this process. During the racial integration of schools in the South at the time, frequently there would be several smaller schools in an area, and they would be racially segregated. So you would have one or two whites only schools, one or two schools for people of color. And then when integration occurred, they would create one larger school that was taken by putting all of the kids from those smaller schools and creating one large city or county school to house all of those students. The high school I actually graduated from was a school that was originally kind of formed in that sort of way. Not entirely, but it was sort of created by taking the largest school building in the area and demolishing the smaller schools and moving all the students into the larger building. So that's what happened with the school we're following here, is they shut down in real life several smaller schools that had been segregated based on race. And they created an entirely new school to house students from, I think, 3 or 4 different schools that were in that area. And so they pulled all the tax money, and they pulled all the student base and the teachers and the what have you. And so that's how we end up with 4 coaches by the end of it. 2 black coaches, 2 white coaches that are all working for this program. And they decide to divide it by, the 2 black coaches take the offensive line and the 2 white coaches take the defensive line, and they work with them on that basis so that nobody really has to lose their job or paycheck or move and try to find a new job right before the beginning of a new season and school year.
Mm-hmm.
And so that I thought was interesting, because it was suddenly sprung on basically everybody that, okay, we're not keeping the coaches the same. But I assume the rest of the faculty and staff of the new school probably had some sort of heads up.
Yeah. As the movie shows us, Denzel Washington's character, Herman Boone, comes to the school to be the assistant coach. And then in an attempt to gather favor in integration, the school board makes him the head coach, much to the chagrin of the white students and the white parents. And yeah, how dare this black man take a job from a white man?
And Bill Yost is a white man who had been the coach of the the high school that, like I said, my high school was built from the largest building in the area, and then they moved all the students into that kind of building. And I assume that that's kind of what they did with this school. At least the movie gives us the idea of that. And so you get the feeling that he was at whatever the school's name was before, but that same building. And he had been coaching football at that location for many years before.
We even see some of the white football players wearing the shirt of the old school with the old school name.
Yeah. And so, you kind of feel bad for this guy because it seemed like he thought, well, okay, they'll be integrating the school, but I'll still be coaching football here. And then he finds out that because of the optics, the political optics of the situation, they've decided to bump him from his job, and they were at first going to fire him. And then Boone, Denzel's character, says, no, please stay on and be my assistant coach, be my defensive coach. And they make a deal where Yost says, okay, but my former assistant coach, I can't put him out on the street either. And Denzel says, I already got a guy to move here with me, offering him an assistant coach job because I didn't realize, they told me that you were leaving. And, so he's like, I brought my dude with me from my previous job, And so that's how they end up with 4 coaches on this high school team, is just trying to save everybody's job. I don't know if that is accurate to reality. I mean, I know that Boone and Yost are accurate to reality, but I don't know about the other 2 men.
So obviously, Denzel Washington, he's Denzel Washington. I don't need to tell you who Denzel Washington is.
I mean, we've talked about him before. Go listen to one of the other episodes where we talk about him. But this movie was entirely sold on the back of Denzel Washington's name. I mean, if you look at the poster for this movie, it just says Denzel Washington, Remember the Titans. It gives you no other context for this film.
Other than there's a football player and, Jerry Bruckheimer is producing it.
And honestly, I had forgotten that Jerry Bruckheimer was the producer of this.
Yeah. And it kind of doesn't feel like it. It really doesn't.
Yeah, this is probably the least Jerry Bruckheimer film he ever produced, maybe.
Maybe because it was a biopic and he kind of wanted to change his style a bit.
Yeah, this is very much, I mean, it's very much a Disney-fied film. Let's get that out of the way. And I remember at the time, and looking back, I wanted to verify my memory, and I did. I remember this being called like a very Disney does Hallmark kind of movie. Because this was a first watch for me. We've talked before how much I'm not into sports movies.
Yeah. This was the first all the way through. Because I've seen parts of this movie. I've never seen the movie the whole way through.
Yeah, I think I saw clips when it first came out, near awards season. And the one thing my memory did fail me on before we get into the rest of the cast is I could have sworn this movie was nominated for some Oscars, and it seems like no. It was nominated for BET awards, and it was nominated for NAACP Image Awards, and it was nominated for Teen Choice Awards, and it was nominated for other awards. But it was not nominated for any of the huge award. It wasn't nominated for Golden Globes or, Oscars or even, BAFTAs or anything. It's none of the huge awards.
And it was released in the fall, so it would have been, in Oscar contention. And I feel that Disney may have released it in that time for it to be an Oscar contention. It just never was.
Yeah, and I don't know why I remember this as being like a big awards movie. Like, oh yeah, this movie got nominated for a bunch of awards. Like, to me, this was an awards season movie. And like you said, it was released during awards season, and it felt like an Oscar bait movie. And I remember it being talked about, and I guess it's just because it was sold entirely on Denzel's performance. And when I watched the movie, I was kind of surprised at how little Denzel was in this movie.
Yeah, once again, big star playing a teacher in a movie, and he really doesn't play the main character. The main characters are the kids.
Yeah, and let's talk about those kids, because here's the thing that I did not know or remember, and I guess it was just because I wasn't familiar with them back in 2000 so much. Man, if there is anything this movie has going for it, it is the cast. Whoever cast this film, bravo to the casting director and the director in general. You know, whoever settled on this cast, give that person an Oscar. Because this cast is absolute fire. Let's get to my boy Donald Faison. Donald Faison is
from
at
Scrubs.
The absolute GOAT. Yes. I first knew who he was because of Scrubs, and I have had a mad crush on him since Scrubs.
I knew him in Clueless. I don't know if...
okay. Yeah, I saw him. Okay, yeah, I saw him first in Clueless, but it didn't really click to me who he was. I guess his character just didn't resonate with me in Clueless, you know? He doesn't have as much screen time, and the focus is so much on the girls in Clueless. You know? I don't really feel he shines as much in Clueless, but man, he shines in Scrubs.
And apparently he's coming back for the Scrubs reboot.
Yeah, cannot wait. But as an actor, I love watching Donald Faison on screen as an actor.
He has such charisma, and he kind of steals... I mean, this is him in general, is that he steals every scene that he's in.
Yeah, and he did it in this film. Yeah. Every time he was in a scene, it was like you wanted to watch him. And I was like, you know, if I had seen this back in 2000, I would have been like, okay, I need to follow that dude's career because he's going to be somebody. I would have had, you know, my crush would have started on, you know, from that point, you know. And then you got my boy Ethan Suplee, who I knew before this movie because...
I knew him. He was on Boy Meets World.
I do not remember him from Boy Meets World. I, of course, am the big Kevin Smith stan. So I remember him screaming, "It's a scooter!" You know, I mean, like, he's that guy.
If you watch Boy Meets World, he's Vader's son. Because he's like the fat kid bully for Corey, and then they eventually meet his father, and his father is Vader, the wrestler.
All right, I do remember that storyline now, yeah. I was not the biggest Boy Meets World fan. I'm just gonna say, like, of all the, like, you know, TGIF kind of shows, that was not my favorite. So, you know, it had the voice of Kit.
Yeah.
As the teacher, and that was interesting to me to kind of close my eyes and just pretend every time they were in the classroom they were being taught by a talking car. You know, like, that was funny to me as a kid. But yeah, Ethan Suplee is absolutely like the best character in this movie. Like, we just talked about my love of Donald Faison. Ethan Suplee blows him out of the water every time he is on screen. Like, his character in this movie is just the absolute best thing.
And you know the fact that he's the first of the white kids to kind of embrace the black kids as members of the team. He's sitting with them. He's like, I don't have people. Everyone's my people.
Well, he's he's introduced as a military brat. And he grew up on military bases, and the military bases were already integrated since at least the 50s, if not earlier, So, if you're living on a military base, it's gonna be weirdly a little more common for, you to just be around, white families and black families living side by side on base. A lot more mixed race families in general just living in, on base and everything. So, like, the fact that he would just kind of be like, I'm used to just moving around and kind of making friends with whoever I end up near, regardless of where they're from or maybe what country I find myself in or whatever, kind of makes sense. And it's kind of an interesting. I knew a lot of military brats as a kid because I live in the middle of a bunch of military bases. So it is, a lot of them tend to be that way. People who grew up as military brats. We get baby Hayden Panettiere in here.
Yeah, before she was on Heroes. Save the football fan, save the world.
Yeah, she wasn't yet a cheerleader. She's like a tiny little 8-year-old coach.
A little tomboy. And that's her character for the entire movie, is that she's into football. She's into boy things. And she clashes not only racially, but just in general with Coach Boone's daughter, who was very girly. She has the dolls, very fashionable. Cheryl throws the football at her and she kind of walks back saying, I just did my nails. And she's like completely not interested in football. And as Cheryl's trying to explain the game to her, says, I don't care about football. I'm only here because my dad's the coach.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Cheryl seems to almost have a better brain for coaching than her dad does. Because she's the daughter of the former coach, now assistant coach to Denzel's character.
Mm-hmm.
And, there are scenes where she's giving Denzel tips as they're watching footage from the previous games and stuff. And she's not wrong with what she says. It's like, she's one of those kids that talks to adults as if she's an adult.
And she's the one that takes the change the hardest, because like that's her dad, and her dad is kind of this Hall of Fame coach. And here's this guy
he's trying to get into the Hall of Fame because that's a plot point.
Yeah, and he's like, this guy took my dad's job.
But she comes around and she learns that Coach Boone is not really a bad guy, according to this movie. Who else we got in here? We got slightly less of a baby Ryan Gosling.
Yep.
But pretty young Ryan Gosling.
So this is 2000. So, I mean, we've mentioned it. Ryan Gosling's a Disney kid. He was a Mouseketeer, the 90s Mickey Mouse Club.
Yep, the one with Brittany.
And Justin.
And Christina.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, that was before he was Knuff for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, I was surprised to see him in this. I don't think I ever knew he was in this. And then, of course, we got, Kate Bosworth from Horse Whisperer, Blue Crush, bunch of other stuff.
She plays the girlfriend of Jerry, one of our main white players, who originally is very, how can you play with these black football players? How can you be so nonchalant about hanging out with them and very hesitant in accepting the black students and even coming very close to breaking up with him because he is standing by his teammates and not, quote, his kind.
Yeah, so since we just mentioned Jerry in this is played by Ryan Hurst, and I sent you this off mic, but I kept thinking throughout the movie, and it wasn't until quite a while into the movie that I finally was like, this is bugging me and I gotta look this up. I kept thinking, this guy seems so familiar to me, but his face is not familiar to me. And we've talked before about my face blindness, but something about his mannerisms and his voice kept being like, you know this guy. And then I looked it up, and once I saw a more recent picture of him, I went, my God, I cannot believe that's the same guy. Because I don't know him from Remember the Titans, but I know Ryan Hurst as Opie from Sons of Anarchy.
It's amazing what a beard will do to change someone's face.
And he looks much better with the beard, honestly. The long hair and everything. And if you're a gamer, he's also Thor in God of War Ragnarok. Same guy. Both as the mocap and the voice actor there. And they just recently, at time of recording, announced that he is going to be in the live action adaptation just announced by Amazon Prime of the God of War franchise, except he's not going to be playing Thor. He's going to be playing Kratos.
I could see it.
I mean, I could see it too. And the thing is that if all you know him from is Remember the Titans, do yourself a favor and watch Sons of Anarchy. I have watched that series multiple times, and damn, that is such a good series. Highly recommend it. A lot of good actors in there, and man.
I do want to mention Kip Pardue as Ronnie Sunshine Bass. This movie is the movie he's known for, but the person he's playing, the real Ronnie Bass, would go on and become a big college football player and a sports analyst for ABC Sports, which is owned by Disney, which is probably part of the reason why this movie got made. So, but that's the only other one. And we haven't mentioned Will Patton as Bill Yost. He's in a bunch of other things. Most recently,
from Falling Skies, just saying.
I mean, most recently, he would probably be known for being in the Halloween reboot movies or the sequel movies, the reboot sequel movies. Yeah.
Yeah, and apparently he's on that show Yellowstone, which I've never seen. But like I said, I know him most for the TV series Falling Skies, which is kind of a criminally underrated series.
Mm-hmm.
If you've never seen it. Nice alien invasion story.
So let's kind of get into the story as the movie tells it. Let's go with that. The story as the movie tells it.
The Disney-fied Hallmark version of the story.
Yeah. So this is I guess the best way to kind of talk about this is that there's kind of two halves of the story. Because you have the first half, which is of this 2-hour movie, which is the black students and the white students kind of integrating, and they don't want to work with each other, and but the first half of the movie concentrates on football camp. 2 weeks of football camp prior to the beginning of the season, prior to the beginning of the school year, as the students try to, the coaches try to work together, the students try to work together, and it's rough in that first part, because the black students all want to ride in the bus with each other, and the white students all want to ride in the bus together. And as the movie portrays it, Jerry is kind of the leader of the group, and kind of like he threatens to sit out the whole season because he won't work with a black coach. He won't work with any coach but Coach Yost. but ultimately it's Coach Boone that says, you know what, we're not doing this all black, all white, separate thing. Offensive line on one bus, defensive line on the other bus. And he encourages that each one black student and one white student spend a day with each other, learning about each other, because if they're going to play on the same team, they have to know a little bit about each other, which, as that first hour goes, and it goes rough first because there's fighting. There's the white students don't want to hear the black music. They don't like, the black posters with the fist up from the Olympics, the one. And the black students are not cruel and unusual punishment, they call it, when one of the white students started playing country music. But it's the game that gets them all together. It's them on the field, them playing together, them strategizing together. And that first hour, they get to the football camp, the movie kind of speeds up. At least for me, it went pretty fast for me as they integrate the teams, as they get to know each other, as they put their differences aside and, learn to work together on the field. And, I'm not going to come up here and give you a blow-by-blow of football because that's not my expertise. If you came in here to hear sports analysis, that's not what we do here.
Nor are we even close to being the right people to do so.
No. But we can go through the story, and that's what we are qualified for that.
Yeah.
I mean, I do like how Coach Boone kind of takes the racism in stride, calls Jerry Lewis and his buddy Dean Martin kind of, you want to do this? We'll do this. How his coaching style is kind of, as Yost kind of calls him, a madman with his coaching style. There's that one scene before they get on the bus where, publicly embarrassing him, and he says, "Hey, is that your mom over there?" "Yeah, that's my mother, sir." "Yeah, well, when you get on that bus, you don't have a mother anymore. You have a daddy, and I'm your daddy."
Yeah.
And I kind of liked all, I like all that. Like, this is not a democracy. This is a dictatorship. You will do as I say. Which is already rubbing the white students the wrong way because now they have to take orders from a black coach, and they're just not having it. Him waking them up at 3 a.m. to run. And I do like that part where he makes them run all the way to, and they end up in Gettysburg, and he talks about the Battle of Gettysburg, how it was brother against brother. And right now you're all on the team and you're all brothers, and you got to stand. Are you going to stand with each other or stand against each other? Which is a very interesting way to go about the entire situation. You don't got to like each other. When it comes to any kind of team, you don't got to like the people you're working with, but you got to work together in order to get the job done. That's not just in sports, that's in any profession. You don't have to like your coworkers at your job. You just need to work together and get the job done.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to point out that they are holding their training camp during the summer at Gettysburg College, which is like literally on the land that the battle was fought on. I mean, so much so that some of the buildings on the college campus were used to treat wounded soldiers during the battle. I mean, it's like, so like when you're like, he makes them run so far that they're suddenly in Gettysburg. I do want to point out that they're already in Gettysburg. It's just that I don't think that, he had them running a route where I don't think they intended to end up at the cemetery, and that early in the morning, they're focused on one thing. And to have it's a really well done scene, I will agree with you, where he's screaming at them about football, and he's screaming at them about, you got to be tough and you got to be focused and you got to be, and it's a foggy morning. It's like just at sunrise. There's barely enough light to see where you're going. They're stomping through woods and everything, and they come on this clearing, and he makes them stop, and he goes, "Look over there. Do you see what that is?" And fog just starts clearing enough that you can see the outline of tombstones through the fog and the mist. And I will give it to the director and the cinematographer on this, is that it is a truly impressive shot with Denzel in the foreground giving this speech where he's quoting almost like a Ken Burns documentary.
The director of this movie, Bose Yakin. We've talked about him before because he wrote Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time.
Which this movie is better than, I'll go ahead and say that. But Denzel's voice talking about, these quotes that I assume are from letters home from people who served at Gettysburg, who fought at Gettysburg, because at least in the captions, they're in quotations about, I fought and killed my brother and the conditions at Gettysburg and, all that kind of stuff. And just him standing there framed by that foggy scene where you can just barely see the tombstones fading in and out of the fog in the early morning light. It really isn't an effective scene. And the guys, all these football players, these teenagers suddenly realizing that they're standing on hallowed ground, and that a lot of the guys buried there are probably their age,
Mm-hmm.
They're just young men. They're teenagers, maybe early 20s, many of them. And I think it was one of my favorite scenes in the movie.
Yeah.
I will say that the first part of the movie, here's gonna come my first kind of big beef with the movie. I don't really know anything about Coach Boone as a real human being who lived in this world. Okay. But if we're taking this movie just as a movie, and a writer had to sit down and write this script, an actor had to think about how you are going to portray this man on screen, and taking that into effect, I do not like Coach Boone by the time he gives this speech. I mean, I like this speech. If you just take that clip and put it up on YouTube, which I'm sure somebody has, out of context, it is a great speech. It is a good acting moment for Denzel. However, you kind of like Coach Boone on principle when you first meet him, because he is kind of blameless for what happens in the first part of the movie. He gets offered a job. He does not realize that he is displacing another coach and that somebody is losing their job because of this. He's just told there's an open position and he's moving there. And when he gets there and he realizes that, this other coach was done dirty, he does his best to fix that situation. So you go like, okay, this is a stand-up guy. And then there are all these kind of snot-nosed kids that try to give him guff. And he has to kind of just be stern before they all get on the buses. And you kind of feel for him, He's getting a lot of racism from the white kids, and the black kids, he's trying to kind of tell them, like, hey, look, fair or not, you got to play the black excellence game. Unfortunately, you got to dress a little nicer. You got to watch your manners a little bit more. You're going to be judged by different standards here, whether or not that's right. Okay? Even though he delivers it in kind of a gruff, almost rude way, you do kind of feel for him because he is trying to make sure these kids understand that, I mean, integration was a very dangerous time. There was a lot of violence, and he's trying to keep these kids safe.
Mm-hmm. We see some of that violence right at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah.
And the protesting, the white people protesting the idea of the schools being integrated. The white students, football students, are all set to march and cause harm to the black counter protesters.
Yeah, I remember being told by my mother, who lived through the integration of the high school that both of us graduated from. She was there when they integrated the high school. I'm not sure if she was in high school yet, but she was in the local school system in the town I grew up in. And she told me, because I asked her what it was like one time, and she said, I was terrified to go to school during that time because I would see on the news where other schools were experiencing violence, sometimes from students and sometimes from adults coming to the school and starting violence. And she said, I was terrified that someone was going to start violence at the school. And she said, I heard other students, primarily white students, because, if you can't tell from the way I'm talking about racial issues, I am from a white family. But she said that she would hear other white students around her whisper about them perhaps trying to do violence to black students. And she was scared that they might. And it turns out that there wasn't really any major violence. There were a few fights, as there are frequently in schools, just among students with individual, problems with each other. And we see that in this movie too, that individual students get into fights. But my mother said that there was never any big violent problem locally against the school system. But there was always that threat during that time. And so you feel for Boone when he first starts to take over the program, because he's getting a lot of racism from the white adults and the white students, a lot of disrespect, and he's having to show a lot of strength, a lot of sarcasm. It's Jerry Lewis and Dean Martin here. We got a couple of comedians. He's trying to impress upon the black students that the rules will be different for them, unfortunately, in order to keep them safe. He's trying to keep his family safe. He's trying, and you really do feel for him.
Also, right at that beginning, they're throwing bricks at his house because they don't want a black coach on the school team.
Well, yeah, and they do it later in the movie too. But then where my empathy for him kind of starts to wane is when they get to Gettysburg College for their training camp in the summer before the school year starts. He becomes, I personally would use the word abusive when discussing this character. I have no idea if the real man was like this. A little bit of my research says that he was fired a few years after the events of this movie because there were some accusations that he was abusive towards students, and some of the other coaches said so. I don't know if that was a political motivation, because of, lingering racial issues, or if he really, it said nothing was ever proven, but there were accusations. It didn't say what kind of abuse. It didn't say, you know, but just taking the movie as a movie, a character is written that is portrayed by Denzel Washington. The things that happen at this football camp, I would label an abusive relationship towards students. Now, having kind of grown up in this, around this culture, do I know that these sorts of things happen and used to happen more frequently during this time period? Yes, I do. Does that make it okay? No, it does not.
I mean, there's the part where Petey, Donald Faison's character, is thirsty during practice, and he just says there is no water.
Water makes you weak.
Yeah, and you're going to keep doing these these exercises, these training exercises, until you're not thirsty anymore.
This is Virginia in the summer.
And these kids are in full gear, pads, jerseys, helmets. They're sweating their stuff off here.
Yeah, and he's pushing him to dehydration, and then the assistant coach has to step in and be like, they kind of need water to survive, and maybe you should stop,
I like the line he says here. There's a fine line between genius and crazy, and you're flirting with it.
Yeah. And the other thing is, like, we see him constantly insult these kids, and not like when they deserve. I mean, it's one thing to like sarcastically call a couple of racist numpties, Jerry Lewis and Dean Martin. That's not really going to like scar their psyche for life or anything, but like later on in the movie, I'm kind of skipping ahead a little bit, he says some things to Donald Faison's character, and Donald Faison is like, I can't deal with this. Like, he's just constantly insulting me, and now he's doing it in front of the entire school on a
during the game
day. Yeah, during the game, where like friends and family and classmates and stuff can see,
He benches him in the middle of the game because he's failing.
It's one thing to be benched, but like the way he does it is just ultimately cruel. But like during the training camp, he deprives them of sleep, he deprives them of food, he deprives them of water, overexerts them. You don't want to do this? Well, instead of just training 1 time a day, you're going to train 3 times a day and 4 times a day, and you're going to run a mile for every mistake you make, and you're going to,
until you get it right.
I demand perfection and nothing less,
That actually ends up biting him in the butt, because this gets back to the board and they say, all right, you demand perfection? You have to be perfect this season. You lose 1 game, you're out. Because they're looking for a reason to fire him. They hired him for a job. The job that is getting blowback. They cannot openly fire him without cause. So the cause is, we don't want a losing coach. So you lose 1 game, you're out. Open mouth, insert foot.
Yeah, they put him in for the political optics, and now they can't fire him for being black because of the political optics. So now they have to find a, politically correct, I guess we could say, reason to fire him. And they choose, well, if he starts having a losing record, even by 1 game, then we can fire him and put the other coach back in, who was on his way to being voted into the Hall of Fame and had a really good win record. And, and the thing is that I really, and I mean really, really started to dislike Denzel's character, Coach Boone, while they were at the training camp. And he didn't really get better as a person, I guess, when they came back from the camp. Like, when you first meet him, you're like, man, this guy is against so much, and you can kind of understand why he's putting on this demeanor of being a little gruff and everything. But then he starts to just like bully these kids. And remember, these are kids, These are high schoolers. They are teenagers. And he is bullying them. And I hate to say it, because you never want to have in one of these movies the white savior trope, but they really do kind of turn the Yost character, the the eventual assistant coach, defensive coach, into almost a white savior character.
Yeah. When PD is benched in that scene you talked about, Yost goes to him and says, you know what? Go out for defense. I want you on defense right now. Show me what you got. And it's the differences in the coaching styles where Boone is very, I demand so much of them. I'm going to push them to perfection versus Yost. I'm going to nurture them. I'm going to find their faults, cover it, and nurture the good parts. And that is how the movie explains the two characters' coaching styles. And Boone is seeing it as belittling. How dare you belittle me in the middle of the game in front of everybody, taking one of my offensive players and putting him on your team, on the defensive team.
The thing is that there are people who do believe the way that Boone states his ideology in the movie, which is when Yost confronts him eventually on how he treats these kids, Boone says, but do I treat the black kids and the white kids any differently? One, doesn't really make it any better. Like, if you're an a-hole, but you're an a-hole to everybody, like, okay, yay for equality, I guess, but you're still an a-hole.
Mm-hmm.
You know? Like, yeah, it's bad to be bigoted or biased, but also, can we first start with the baby step of don't be an a-hole to people?
Honestly, the only one he's not an a-hole to is
The little
Louis.
girl.
No. Originally, it's Ethan Suppley's character, because he's literally saying, hey, this is just going to be between you and me. Don't tell anybody. But I want you to work on your studies. I want you to keep your grades average because you could go to college. Seemingly the only person that believes he could go to college. And then that comes up at the, right before the big game where he says, thank you, coach. I got accepted. I'm going to go to college. And he's the first member of his family to go to college. And that's kind of the only, I need to get through to these kids moment for Coach Bill.
But also notice that he doesn't offer to tutor the kid. One of the other players offers to tutor the kid. He just says, every week, bring me your grades because I want to make sure you're keeping them up. I don't want to see you not go to college if you have the ability to go to college. But the thing is that really about the kid going to college, or is that about the kid who is an absolute unit in this movie? If you don't know who Ethan Suppley is, at this point in time, he was a very large individual. He has since slimmed down. But at the time, he looked like an absolute brick wall of a dude. He
looked like a linebacker.
Yeah, I mean, he really did. He looked like the type of guy you do not want to have to try to tackle on a field. Is gonna have to take 6 dudes to take that guy down.
You tackle him, you felt like you got tackled.
Yeah. He is by far the largest dude on the team, both in height and in width. He's just a walking tree trunk. He is the ent of the team. And most sports teams, I know because I used to be a tutor and had to tutor a lot of athletes, they have minimum grade requirements for you to be on sports teams in academics. And I think when Ethan Suppley's character looks at him and Denzel says, well, what about you? You planning to go to college after high school? And he's like, nah, I don't got the brains. I just figured if I have to go to high school, I might as well punch people. And you get the feeling that because this guy is a military brat, as I said before, that Like, that was probably his plan, was I'm going to play football just so that I'll have something to keep my interest while I'm in high school. And because I have to have, like, a high school degree or GED or something like that, probably, to be taken into the military at the time. And then as soon as I finish whatever mandatory schooling I have to have, I'm just going to go into the military like the rest of my family and just be career military. And you have a feeling that that's probably what everybody else in his family did, because they were told that academics weren't that important and that they were all, I mean, he refers to himself, and I apologize for using the term, but it is the term they use in the movie. He calls himself poor white trash. And so you have a feeling that he was always from a rural, trailer park poverty background where, like, all the men in his family just, either worked minimum wage jobs, and if they were healthy enough to go into the military, they would go into the military and they'd stay in for as long as they could and, you know, either live off a pension or, get some kind of minimum wage blue collar job after that.
Yeah.
And, spoiler alert jumping ahead, but it did say that the real guy actually did go on to college. We find out at the end of the movie that he ends up graduating high school with a C plus average, which is enough to get him into, a basic school, especially if you get some kind of football scholarship, which I think he did according to the movie, maybe. And then he became like a small business owner somewhere. But we never actually see in the context of the film that Boone facilitates him working on his academics. We see that other players kind of rally around, but we don't see Boone going up to them because he says it'll just be a secret between me and you. We never see Boone say, I'll tutor you or I will find you help. I mean, I don't remember that. Do you?
No.
He later, the guy later confides in one of the other players that he's struggling with his academics and he's worried what the coach is going to say. And his buddy says, I'll tutor you. And that's probably what saves his GPA. But it's not the coach. The coach just says he wants to monitor his. And I'm thinking that's not because he wants the kid to go to college necessarily. It's probably because he wants the kid to keep playing football.
Yeah, your grades dip, I'm going to have to cut you. But one of the big stories in the movie is the relationship between Martin and Lewis, Gary and Ray. They start out, they're best friends. They're standing up. They're the two students that say they're not going to play for a black coach, and Denzel kind of, calls them Martin and Lewis and all that. But through the football training camp and throughout the movie, Gary becomes good friends with Julius, played by Wood Harris. And that seems to ruffle the feathers of Ray because, hey, you're my best friend. Why are you suddenly hanging out with him? And it's Ray that starts kind of missing tackles and purposely botching stuff in the game. It is because of Ray purposely playing bad that Petey gets injured. He breaks his wrist in one of the games. And it is Gary that goes to Boone and says, you got to cut him. He's not doing his job on the field, which is to protect his fellow players. While he's not actively trying to injure his fellow players, he's not really preventing anyone else from doing it. And, Boone looks at him. You're the captain of the team. I don't cut anybody. He says it right at the beginning of the movie. He will not cut anyone off the team. I mean, you might be sitting on the bench for the season, but he won't cut you. But he tells Gary that, hey, it's your call as captain of the team. You want him cut? You tell him. It's a bad position to be in when you have a player who is letting his prejudices affect the game. He may be on this team with a bunch of black players, and he's, not doing anything to protect his team, purposely playing bad to throw the game. Again, he knows that if they lose a game, Coach Boone is out. So why not purposely play bad to lose the game? Boone is even implying that Yost is telling the defense to play bad because he's thinking Yost is trying to throw games to get him out. And it really is just some of the white players just purposely playing bad. And when, Gary comes up to Ray and tell him, hey, you're out, you're off the team, Ray just like, wow, you're throwing away our friendship for them. He literally says that, for them. You're siding with them over me. And it shows that Gary really has embraced the team as part of as brothers. He even refers to Julius as his brother. But the fact that he's willing to cut his best friend from the team because he is costing them points on the field. They don't lose games. Spoiler for the movie, they have a perfect season. They do not lose a single game in the season. But for someone who starts the movie off very racist, learns to have this camaraderie with the black players to the point where he almost loses his girlfriend. He definitely loses his best friend because he is siding with the black players on his team. It's a hard position to be in the movie. It's a nice growth of the character, going from a very hard racist character at the beginning to seeing the black players, especially Julius, as his brother.
Yeah. I do want to point out that the character of Ray, the Dean Martin, was totally made up for this movie. Did not exist in real life. It is a good dynamic to show, and I think they probably made the character of Ray because maybe you don't want to slander a real person as being like the racist one on the team,
Yeah.
Because it kind of seems like all of the people that I know are based on real people sort of have, at the very least, redemption kind of arcs,
Yeah.
where maybe they start out the movie as sort of having racist tendencies or ignorant feelings or something like that. There does seem to be that the movie wanted to make sure to have them portrayed as having had some growth and, not portraying them as, bad people by the end of the movie. But I think that's why that they kind of included that fictional player, Ray, to be the one that, never learned the lesson, and had to be kicked off the team.
So I mentioned it earlier, but we have Cheryl, which is Coach Yost's tomboyish daughter, very into football. Even Boone kind of comments on how, maybe you should raise her more to be like a girl. And Yost kind of turns to her
and specifically says, buy her a doll.
And he's like, I tried that. All she wanted to do was play with a football. I just stopped trying. So she's very into football. She's a super fan. She's at the game, yelling at the players.
Yelling at the refs.
Yeah. Like you said, she knows the game. She's even having, adult level conversations with Boone on how to coach the team. She's probably just as good a coach as her father, which causes frustrations between her and Boone's daughter, who has no interest in football. It's very much a girly girl, wearing dresses, playing with dolls, doesn't care about football. And I love that interaction at one of the early games in the movie where, Cheryl is just all into the game, yelling at the players, yelling at the ref. And Boone's daughter turns to her mother and says, "Mama, are all white girls that crazy?" I had to laugh
And you know what? Speaking on behalf of someone who has spent a lot of time around white girls, yes. Yes. Almost all white girls are that crazy.
Yeah. I do a podcast with a crazy white girl.
Yeah. I'm a different kind of crazy. I mean, I'm not typical white girl crazy. I'm kind of like slightly off to the side white girl crazy, but yeah, I will cop to that.
But going back to Gary for a moment, because there is part of this movie that is part based in real life, and it is the real Gary Bertier, who Ryan Hurst's character. In the movie, the accident happens right before the big game. He's in a car accident and he's paralyzed from the waist down. That did happen in real life. As far as I am aware, that happened after all of that. But yeah, he was involved in a car accident. He was paralyzed from the waist down. He would never play football ever again. But it doesn't mean his career as an athlete was over. The real Gary Bertier would become an athlete in the Paralympics. He mentions it in the movie that there are Olympics for wheelchair users. And he does become a star athlete in that. And he would spend the rest of his life advocating for disability rights and disability spinal injuries specifically. So, he would turn that negative into a positive. Unfortunately, and this is kind of the framing device of the movie, the real Gary Bertier would be in a second car crash in 1981, and that would be the car crash that would end his life. And that is what the movie begins and ends on, is Gary's funeral, where the members of his team, his coach, his fellow players gathered. We would see a different actor playing the grown-up Cheryl, as this movie is kind of told in flashback from them. And I guess we can assume that the narration is Cheryl's eulogy for Gary. We never see her say anything, but considering that the framing device of the movie is Gary's funeral, I just assumed that was Cheryl's eulogy for Gary.
Yeah.
Sadly, the real Cheryl Yost would also pass away just a few years before this movie would come out. They don't mention that in the movie.
Yeah, they don't. She ended up dying at age 34. Just so tragically young.
But let's wrap this up by talking about the big climax of the movie, the big championship game. And going into the championship game, the fix is in. The coach for the other team talks to Yost as he's getting his toast for the future Hall of Famer. They keep bringing up the Hall of Fame. The fix is in. They're saying, hey, Coach Boone. They don't say Boone. They say a word that rhymes with Boone that is very offensive that I will not repeat.
Yeah.
Boone's going.
They will use that slur, and they come very close. You know that if they were to say one more letter in a sentence, it would be the letter N. But there is one sentence where a guy starts spouting off in Denzel's face, and he says a sentence and he gets stopped right at the point where you know that if it continued one more letter, that would be the one.
Yeah.
But they cut him off before he can even form that letter. And
not even Disney is going that far. If this wasn't a Disney movie.
Yeah, if it wasn't a Disney movie, they would have let him form that sound before he got cut off. But instead, it's like, if you know the way, like, extremely racist people sling those kind of slurs in the Deep South, especially, it's like, that's the next word because that's the phrasing. you know? And I'm like, I have heard that phrase come out of people's mouths being slung at friends of mine and stuff. And I'm like, that's the point where you usually throw a punch at somebody. And like that's when, it's like there's three people in the room. There's the really racist guy, there's Coach Yost, and then there's Coach Boone. And the racist parent that has come in being mad that his kid was benched is yelling at Coach Boone, and Yost cuts him off before he can get to the really bad slur. And I think that it's interesting which slurs Disney was like, well, we want to show that these people are racist, so we have to have them say objectionable language. So which slurs do we consider mild enough to be objectionable, but not crossing a line against the Disney brand and against the PG rating of the movie or whatever,
Yeah, we got to keep this movie family friendly.
They even kind of write off the fact that there is really no swearing in this movie, because there's a character whose nickname is the Rev, and at one point Ethan Suplee's character Louie is asked, tell me about one of your teammates of a different race, and he chooses the Rev because it's one of the people he knows best. And he says that he's called the Rev because he's always praying and he won't tolerate anyone on the team swearing around him. And that was the point in the movie where I was like, even for a Disney movie, they're not I'm guessing this is a PG movie. It might be PG-13, but it really felt like PG. Because, you see, one guy throwing a punch or whatever. But yeah, I mean, because I was like, I don't remember them saying, hell or damn or whatever. And I think the most objectionable, curse word kind of thing is the one racial slur you just kind of brought up.
I mean, one of the coaches, again, I have to say, I have to apologize before I say it. One of the coaches refers to Coach Boone as a monkey. And it's part of that the fix is in thing where they're trying to try to rig the games against Boone. And after the Titans win, Boone tosses him a banana.
And the other guy kind of looks at it like, yeah, okay, I deserved that.
So the fix is in. The refs are making bad calls against the Titans, trying to sway the game in their favor so they lose. So Boone is out. And everyone is seeing this. The coaches are seeing this. Cheryl's seeing this. Ultimately, Yost goes up to the ref and says, call the game fair. I know what you're doing. Don't do it. Call the game fair.
And he threatens the ref too. He says, I don't care if I go down with you. If you don't start calling this game fair, I am immediately leaving this game and going to the press and telling them everything. Because the thing is that the school board and all of the athletics board members and stuff came to him beforehand and told him, look, we have to get Coach Boone out of this program. He's causing too much trouble. And if you go along with it and work with us, not only will you get your head coach job back for next season, but we will also make sure you get voted into the Hall of Fame, which is what he really wants. Him and his daughter have been talking about it the whole movie. And again, I hate to say it, but they kind of hopefully accidentally portray Coach Yost as a kind of white savior figure, because in the end, it is nothing Coach Boone does and nothing that the players do, either the black or the white players. It is fully on Coach Yost, who walks up to the ref and pulls him aside and says, if you do not start calling this game completely fairly, I don't care what it costs me. I don't care if I go down with you. I do not care if I never work again. I don't care what it does to my reputation. I will go to the media and I will tell them everything I know, and I will name you specifically. I will tell them what you are doing, and I will make sure that you are ruined.
And then the refs start calling it fair. And then one of the members of the board comes to Yost and says, you can forget about the Hall of Fame. It's no longer on the table. You just gave up your position, this dream of yours to go to the High School Football Hall of Fame in Virginia for that guy. And I love the daughter's reaction. While she's upset that her dad's not going to be in the Hall of Fame, it's like, she's like, who wants to be in a Hall of Fame with a bunch of rednecks anyway?
Yeah.
But big game. The last half hour of the movie is just this championship game.
Yeah, it wants to be a movie about race and racial equality and all that kind of stuff. But in the end, it has to be a sports movie, just by the way it's set up. So everything, including all of the racial prejudice, kind of has to be decided based on, like, the last play of a football game.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's like, oh, this touchdown fixed racism. Good for it.
Like, I learned a lot from you, Coach, Yo saying, I learned a lot from you, Coach Boone, and blah, 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 blah. It's like the power of football ended racism in Virginia, apparently. And, I mean, we can just wrap it up if you want. It's,
yeah, and then we go back to the framing device of, all of them standing there 10 years after that game.
Titans win the championship game. That scene from MST3K, Packers win the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Yeah, they win, but the narration from the older Cheryl says, while they won state, they did end up losing afterwards, but that didn't matter.
Yeah, undefeated season. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gary went on to be in the Paralympics. He got a gold medal in shot put, and then he ended up having another car crash. The thing is, in real life, both of those car crashes did happen. However, the first car crash did not happen like it did in the movie. They made it look in the movie like the first car crash was Gary's fault. He was just having such a good time after the game that...
Yeah, he wasn't paying attention. He was pointing at the fans. Yeah, you're the guy right there, man.
Yeah, and that he pulled out in front of an oncoming truck and got, T-boned by that. That is not what happened. It also didn't happen before the big game. It happened after the big game. Apparently, Gary did in real life get to play in that season-ending championship game, and he was heading home from the celebratory dinner or something. That was like, yay, we had the undefeated season, go us. And he was driving home after that, and the car had a mechanical failure. It turns out that the original crash was not his fault at all. The investigators looked into what caused the crash. He was alone in the car and was the only person injured. It was apparently car versus trees or something. And apparently it was that something in the car was faulty and caused the crash. There was nothing he could have done to prevent it. And so I feel it did him a disservice to say that his accident was due to his negligence or something. And then they do get it right that he did actually go on to be a Paralympian. He was apparently a great advocate for disability rights and stuff like that. Went on to college and remained an athlete basically until his death, and then was in a car that was struck by a drunk driver. So that, again, not his fault. And just two absolute horrific tragedies that he could not have seen coming.
Yeah.
Speaking of Olympic things, even if you've never heard this movie, you have heard one of the pieces of music for this movie. And by the way, the soundtrack for this is an absolute banger. They picked some really good songs to go on the soundtrack.
A lot of big hits from the late 60s, a lot of Motown.
Yeah, a lot of Motown. Even like one country song that I don't like the original, but I like the Muppet cover of it, because Act Naturally is really good. There's a really good cover from the Muppet Show that Scooter does. So go look that up if you've never heard it. But if we're mentioning the Olympics and this movie together, there is a track that was written for the score of this movie called Titan Spirit, and it has been used in so many sports things since then. But if you watch a lot of Olympics, like I watch a lot of Olympics, when you hear it, you will immediately recognize it. Because when they end the broadcast day for the Olympics, since NBC has been broadcasting the Olympics since the early 2000s, so right after this movie came out, every day when they end their Olympic coverage, when they play the credits and the footage from the day, the clips to sum up the day, that is the song they play. That song, Titan Spirit. And it was written for this movie. And so when I heard it in this movie, I was like, wait a minute, is that where that's from? And so I had to look it up, and yes, it is.
So on that, Kiki, does Remember the Titans have the magic?
It's definitely not the worst movie we've seen, and it's definitely not the worst sports movie we've seen. Honestly, I was expecting more out of this movie. I think that it really tries to simplify the racial issues of the time a little too much. Like, even for Disney, this feels so... I mean, I hate to say it, but like, Pocahontas has more complex racial politics than this movie.
I mean, we've talked about other biopics that deal with racism, Hidden Figures, Ruby Bridges. And I feel like both of them did it better than Remember the Titans.
Yeah, and I think it's because they tried to mix the tropes of a sports movie with the, racial politics in America especially is a very nuanced and fraught subject, whereas the tropes of a sports movie is one of the simplest, straightforward movie trope genres that you can have. And I think it's so difficult putting those together. Also, I think I'm just biased against any football movie that's not Rudy. Because that movie is the ultimate football movie. So like, if you want to be a good racial... And it's not like Denzel has not done some really good nuanced racial politics movies, like he is the absolute GOAT in some of those, but I'm not sure this is one of them. And as far as football movies, it's no Rudy. So while it's not a bad movie and all the actors really bring it, I think the script lets them down.
I'm going to agree with you on that. I agree that it tries to be both a movie that deals with racism and a sports movie, and it really should have decided to be one or the other. As a sports movie, I will say this has magic. as a sports movie. As a movie that deals with the subject of racism, it is too simplistic to have the magic. So I will say yes, magic, but only in terms of it as a sports movie.
Yeah, it's a mid-level sports movie. It is a lower tier racial politics movie. How about that?
Yeah, we'll go with that.
If you're looking for a good football movie for it's Super Bowl time and I want to watch a good football movie, go watch Rudy instead. Just my 2 cents.
I guess that's all we can say about Remember the Titans. Next week, we have done a lot of animated movies on the podcast. We've done Walt Disney Animation Studios, we've done Pixar, but we really haven't touched a lot of Blue Sky Studios. The only 2 Blue Sky movies that we've done on the podcast so far was the Peanuts movie, and if you count it, Nimona, since it was supposed to be originally a Blue Sky Studios film before Disney canceled it. So we are going to take a look at the first Blue Sky Studios movie, Ice Age, and I believe this will be a first watch for you, Kiki.
It will. I don't really know how I have not seen this yet, but yeah.
Ice Age, the trademark franchise of Blue Sky Studios, and there's supposed to be a new Ice Age movie coming out from Disney at some point in the future. So we'll talk all about that next week. Come back next week for the first Ice Age movie, and we will talk to you all next time. Bye.
Bye.
Don't let the magic stop here.
Keep the conversation going. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Threads at Rewatching the Magic.
We are also on Blue Sky, rewatchingthemagic.bsky.social. And new episodes are available at rewatchingthemagic.podbean.com and youtube.com/@rewatchingthemagic. Remember, the magic is for everyone.
It only stops if you let it.
We know that right now, things are tough.
But in the words of Jim Henson, the only way the magic works is by hard work. But hard work can be fun.
Check out our show notes for ways that you can help.